Reading with your kids.
Hola, niho, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muliwanji, namaste, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jadley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We are coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville, in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts, in the shadow of the Great Blue Hills. We are so delighted and so very honored that you're joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Good Pods, Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you find your podcast. Our guest today is Kaya Henderson. She is here to celebrate Reconstruction, a dynamic website with all sorts of resources for families. Before we invite Kaya into the studio, we want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the secret science of sports, the math, physics, and mechanical engineering behind every grand slam, triple axel, and penalty kick. Written by our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. Why does a football spiral? How do some athletes jump so high? Well, the answer is science. The secret science of sports helps kids better understand concepts of science, technology, engineering, and math through the sports they love to play and watch. What a fantastic book to have as you and your family enjoy the Winter Olympics. Get your copy today at Amazon or jenswanbooks.com. The Secret Science of Sports by our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. Join us right now from our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. Our guest today here is the driving force behind a really great program. Is called Reconstruction. Please welcome to the show, Kaya Henderson. Hey, Kaya, how are you?
I'm doing great, Jed. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. Reconstruction sounds fascinating. Tell us all about it.
So Reconstruction is a new offering where we are providing unapologetically Black classes on Black history, on Black culture, Black literature, for families who want that kind of supplemental education and identity development and exposure for their kids. We take a page from Hebrew school or Chinese school, where young people go on Saturdays or Sundays to get deeply steeped in their own history and culture. And what we know is the research shows that when kids have a strong cultural identity, their academic success is much easier and faster. We know that their leadership skills are developed much more quickly. Their community responsibility is strong. And so we sort of take from the Frederick Douglass quote, which says, if you don't build strong children, you will have to repair broken men. And this is our attempt to build strong African American children.
What a fascinating idea, and what a great quote. That's something that we should all remember, I think. And we've forgotten about it, and that's a tragedy, not only for people who have to pay to repair the broken men, but for the broken men, especially if they didn't need to experience that. I'm curious, is there, and I certainly I agree that, the research is saying that, kids with this identity do so much better. Do we understand why that is? Why is it when kids can identify and say, yes, I have this Jewish background, I have this Lithuanian background, I have this African American background, why that helps them in school and in so many other aspects of their lives?
Absolutely. I mean, first of all, my background is purely educational. I started my career as a classroom teacher, teaching middle school Spanish in the South Bronx. Most people know me as having served as the chancellor of DC Public Schools. I served in leadership at DC Public Schools for almost 10 years. And there I had the privilege of helping to turn around what was the lowest performing urban school district in the country. We are now the fastest improving, still have a ways to go. But part of that work included deep curriculum change. And what the academic research shows you is that when kids see themselves in the material that they are learning, they're engaged more deeply in the material as opposed to learning about other people. When you see yourself, your community, people you know, right, you engage more deeply. It also makes you feel legitimatized when you see yourself in the curriculum. It's the same sort of thing when we think about representation on TV or in film, why this is so important. And you know, kids bring a lot of the educational research shares that background knowledge actually helps accelerate academic success. So when kids can make the connections between home and school, community and school, family and school, their engagement is up. They take to the content much more quickly, and you know, you literally see accelerated academic achievement. And so we are taking that. I mean, you also think about it. Think about African American kids and the steady diet of negativity that kids are fed through media and from society. As a culture, we're told that we're lazy, that education is not a high value for us. And many of these things are not actually true. When you think about the traditions in the African American community of citizenship schools right after slavery, where we taught each other to read so that we could vote, or freedom schools in the 60s, 70s, 80s, where we educated folks from across the country around Black history and Black culture. We actually do have a deep tradition of education. In fact, we call ourselves Reconstruction because Reconstruction is an oft skipped part of American history, where in the 12 years post-emancipation, the African Americans in the United States actually created 5,000 community schools, 37 historically Black colleges and universities in 12 years, right? It was a time of tremendous political activism for us. We sent our first senators to the United States Senate, first Black senates. The legislature of Mississippi and South Carolina were heavily represented by African Americans. 500,000 Black men voted in the presidential election, which granted Ulysses S. Grant the presidency, and he won by 300,000 votes. This was also a time, again, this is all in 12 years. This is a time when we own 24% of farmland in America. It's a time when we incorporated our own towns, our own banks, our own insurance companies. And so we wanted to hearken back to those traditions of Black excellence, Black joy, Black entrepreneurship, Black innovation, and remind our young people that that's where we come from. And when the narrative that kids are hearing about themselves and their history and their culture is that they are innovators, they are entrepreneurs, they are business people, they are whatever, that counteracts the negative messages that they're hearing from society, and allows them to see themselves differently in school and in life.
Mm-hmm. We talk a lot here on the podcast about books being mirrors, windows, and sliding glass doors. And certainly you're talking about how important it is that your courses are acting as mirrors, letting kids see themselves and their history in really positive lights. How important is it, and is there a way that Reconstruction can help kids outside of the African American community see, change their perspective of their neighbors?
Absolutely, Jed. I mean, the windows and mirrors concept is actually how we approached curricular reform at DC Public Schools, and I built on that to build Reconstruction. I thought I could not, when I watched what was happening when all kids saw themselves in the curriculum, I literally just didn't have enough time in the day and days in the year to give kids as much as they wanted and needed. And so I thought, how can I take this outside of the school context where we're not constrained by 6.5 hours a day or 180 days a year, and give kids and families the option to do as much of this as possible. And again, not just African American kids. You're absolutely right. We have families who take Reconstruction classes non-Black families, because they want their kids to have access to African American history and culture in ways that it's not taught in school. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is we say we are not school. We don't want to be school. We want to feel different. And so we try to create a space that feels very, very different than school. And our kids are responding to that. Our average student satisfaction score by the young people who take our classes is a 4.8 out of 5. Wow. Now, let me be very clear, Jed. There's no bells and whistles. There's no gamification. There are no avatars. This is a Zoom call with 6 to 10 kids and a tutor who we call a reconstructor. And they're engaging deeply in all kinds of very interesting courses, from Black Shakespeare to spades courses to African American women poets, from Phyllis Wheatley to Amanda Gorman, cooking for the soul. We've got hardcore phonics classes for our shorties, which is what we call our little ones, so that they can learn how to read, but it's all using African American books and materials. And literally what our kids say is, this content that we're getting is more interesting than what we're learning in school. They say we love our reconstructor. They're like our cool older brother or our cool older sister. And we love being in conversation with kids from all over the country. Because the beauty of this is we do this all online. And that means that your kid could be sitting in class with kids from the neighborhood, but they could also be sitting in class with kids from New Orleans or Oakland or, rural Georgia. And those are the things that make this very different from school.
Yeah. I want to talk to you about Black Shakespeare, but first, why, if Reconstruction is working so well and kids are loving this method of learning so well, then why did schools fail so badly over the past year? All we've heard. And I'm a huge supporter of online schools. I love it. My daughter did her entire degree program online. It was the best thing for her. But, everybody went online. Practically everybody went online learning for the last year. And all we've heard is that kids didn't learn anything. They're miserable. They hate school. They're suicidal.
Yeah. Why? How?
Yeah.
What happened?
Well, that was one of the things. It was frustrating for me. My wife has been a teacher in the Boston system for 34 years. She just retired. But and I understood that when they went out on March 16th or 17th, my wife came home and said, "What's a Zoom? I have to start teaching on Zoom next week." I understand for those 2 weeks it was a nightmare because no one's prepared for it. But after that, Reconstruction was around. There are all sorts of online learning programs, and it seemed like no one reached out. It's like, we have to start from scratch. And
so, having been the superintendent of a school system, I can tell you what happened. First of all, I think nobody really expected the pandemic to last for as long as it did. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think that we initially took seriously enough the need to pivot to online learning. I think many people just thought we'll do this for a couple weeks or a couple months. And so, we didn't make the switch. I would say secondly, teaching is one of the few professions that still operates exactly the way it did 100 years ago, right? We don't bank the way we used to bank. We don't shop the way we used to shop. We don't watch TV the way we used to watch TV, but we teach pretty much the same way. You look at a classroom now and you look at a classroom 100 years ago, and they pretty much look the same and do the same thing mostly. And so what we haven't done as a profession is really commit to diversifying our methods of instruction. And this is not just K to 12. This is higher education as well. I think higher education is beginning to make the pivot a little more quickly than we have. And so you have lots of people who, even if they wanted to do something different, they didn't know how, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the professional development. And we've told people just go do it, fix it, right? And And online teaching and learning is very different than in person, which we realized. I think also, to be frank, besides the teachers and the supports that they needed, I just am not particularly sure that we always center kids as in this conversation. I've watched and I continue to watch these conversations around closing schools or not closing schools, and a lot of the conversation is around what's best for adults and not what's best for kids. I posted on my Twitter account an article from the leader of a COVID task force out of Harvard, who basically said these are all of the reasons why it is actually pretty detrimental to kids to close schools, and we have to not close schools. We have to figure out how to do the things to not close schools. And I posted it because I thought in all of these conversations around school closings, I wasn't hearing about the impact on kids. And I mean, it was one of my most, active Twitter threads in terms of reactions and whatnot. And I think parents are worried because they are seeing the impact on kids. I think teachers are worried as well, and teachers are also worried about health, their own health, the health of the people that they live with and whatnot. And I think we've had a huge leadership failure, frankly, we've sort of vacillated. We've let the politics kind of run the conversation and saying, we know that the best thing for kids is for them to be in school. So let's assume we're not closing schools. And then what does that mean? That means we have to change a whole host of things. It means we have to change what supports we give to teachers. It means we might have to change the school day and the school year. It means we might have to stop thinking about seat time. When we talk about high school credit, for example, we talk about Carnegie units, how many credits you have. That all that measures is how long you've spent sitting in a class. It doesn't actually measure your mastery of the subjects or competency. And so there are ways that you can do that. I was sort of playing around on Twitter and posted a piece about just changing from a semester system to a trimester system, where you could actually have kids go to 2 semesters. But if the school year is on trimesters, then you only have 2/3 of kids in school at any one time. And literally, I just got, responses that were like, oh my God, my school district would never do that, would never even consider it. Well, why not? Because we lack bold leadership in education. And so what I fundamentally believe is that parents are always going to figure it out for their kids. We've seen that in this pandemic. We've seen parents create learning pods. We've seen parents actually activate around online learning. We have loads of parents who've taken up Reconstruction courses to supplement the work that their kids are or aren't getting in schools. And I think, frankly, for identity development, you can't always leave it to schools. As we're watching all of these conversations around who teaches history and what gets taught, there are certain schools and school boards that are going to eliminate pieces of history that are critical to what I want for my kid. And so if school is not going to provide that, I'm going to find a way to get that for my kid. And that's how I think Reconstruction helps parents take control and decide Reconstruction and a number of other online solutions, I think, help parents drive what is happening for their kids.
Yeah. I love that. I agree with you on so many different areas. I think we do need to shake things up. There's no reason why we should, be locked into this September to June or September to May so the kids can get out and help with the harvest. There's not many kids helping with harvest anymore.
I mean, there's so many things that we could do, right? We could think about teaching differently. We need certified professionals who know how to deliver instruction to young people. And we need other caring adults who can facilitate small group, learning, and who can do other things so that the whole entire burden is not on the teacher. What if a teacher only had to teach for 3 or 4 hours a day and somebody else did, supplemental stuff or whatever? I look at the nonprofit sector, which rose to the occasion when our educational institutions failed. Community-based organizations all over this country stood up and met kids' needs in a variety of ways when schools weren't. So why are we still treating them like stepchildren and relegating them to after school or out of school time? Why not bring them to the table and create a much more holistic approach to what our kids are getting in school? We ask schools to do way too much.
Mm-hmm.
We have to teach 950 zillion things in, 180 days, and there's no way to do it all. And so let's figure out what is really important to happen in school, and then let's build all of the ancillary things that we want for all of our kids. That doesn't all have to happen between 9 and 3, Monday through Friday. That can happen in a much more robust way. And so, we think part of the way that happens is also with families. Families are kids' first teachers. Families spend more time with their kids than kids spend in school. And so part of what we also wanted to do was create new opportunities for families to engage with their kids. One of the things that we hear from we have a couple of courses that are really family friendly that provide opportunities for kids and families to do something amazing together. So I'll give you an example. We have a cooking class called Cooking for the Soul. The point of it is to teach kids how to cook, teach kids the history of 5 soul food staples, and teach them how to cook it. Because what we realize is as we move away from our extended families, you don't know how to make your grandmother's macaroni and cheese or, whatever. And so we created this course. Kids learn where the ingredients come from, how these ingredients have shown up in our history, and then they actually learn how to cook these 5 dishes with an amazing chef from New Orleans. And we did a soul food summer camp, we called it, with a group of families in Pittsburgh, about 100 families. And over the course of 1 week, every evening for 2 hours, they took the Cooking for the Soul course, and they cooked together. And, grandmothers and grandpas were coming over to cook with their kids. We have video of kids with their chef hats on, cutting and chopping and doing all of the things. We have a Facebook group for these 100 families. And the thing that parents continued to say was, I haven't had this much fun with my kid in a long time. We would love to do this kind of thing once a month or every other month, because it's an opportunity for us to come together as families. And so we have a number of courses that are like that teach our history and our culture. Spades is another course. One of the Spades, the card game, is a game that's widely played in the African American community. And one of the things that we realized during the pandemic, when many of us were home with our kids, is they don't know how to play spades. And so I watched everybody from the Obamas to friends of mine teaching their kids how to play spades over the pandemic. And I thought we should have a spades class so that people learn how to play spades. And so we have families now signing up to take this spades class together so that they can play, together. We've got the Black Film Club, where we are, you watch a film together and then discuss it. And we were privileged enough to partner with Ava DuVernay's film company, Array, to co-create the curriculum for the film Selma. And so we have, in fact, coming out right in time for Dr. King's birthday, a class on the film Selma that kids and parents can watch together, and then we discuss in the class. So we've been able to do some pretty cool things. In addition to, more academic things, we have book clubs where young people are reading together and talking together, where parents are reading together. We had a very successful book club that we did a couple months ago on Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me. And it's not a new book. It's been out for a few years, but the book is, a Black father's letter to his son about, who he is in the world as a Black man. And what we found was many parents had read it before, some hadn't, but they wanted to have a conversation with other parents about how to tell their Black children how to make sense of what's going on in the world. And so parents said to us, this was amazing to read this with other parents. And so, one of the other things about not doing this in school is I have the flexibility to do cool things like partner with, Array Films, or partner with the Folger Shakespeare Library, which is the preeminent Shakespearean institution in the United States, to create 5 classes in the Black Shakespeare series. I am free. I'm free from the curricular restraints. I'm free from the state regulations. I'm free from whatever to create the kinds of courses that we think are compelling that our customers tell us that they want and are compelling to families.
I think you just kind of hit the nail on the head there in terms of education. You're looking out and you realize that you have customers and that you need to serve the needs of your customers. And if you're not delivering content that are making your customers happy, that they find compelling, that they find valuable for them to make their investment in, they're going to vote with their feet and they're going to go somewhere else. I think for too long, kind of schools are kind of going, it's the way it is. You don't like it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What
are you going to do?
Well, what I found in my work at DC Public Schools is educators have significant expertise, but students and families and the community also has expertise. Their expertise might look different. They didn't get it through a university program, or they don't have data and spreadsheets that say this, that, or academic research, but they have lived experiences, they have history and culture. And when you put those two sets of expertise together, then you actually get to solutions that are far better than if either one was coming up with the solution themselves. And so I think a big shift in education is we need to actually co-create solutions with the community. That's how we won in Washington, D.C. That's how we turned around what was the lowest performing school system. We worked with our community to ask them first. People would say to me, well, Kaya, what is your strategic plan going to look like? What are you going to do for the first 90 days? These are not my schools. These are our schools. So we are going to engage in a community planning process to set the goals that we want for our school system. And the community is going to hold us accountable to delivering what they have asked for. And that's a pivot in leadership, I think, that needs to happen in education.
I agree. You're talking about that whole experience, combining the experience of people in the fields with the academic knowledge. I just took my niece, who is graduating high school and has a love of engineering, and I just happened to have met an engineer at a function, and I told him, and he said, bring her up. I build jet engines. Yep. Bring her to the plant. So I brought her and her friend to this plant, and we had amassed 3 hours with an expert looking inside, touching, seeing the components being put together. Just did never get that in a classroom.
Not in a classroom.
Yeah.
But we could, because just in the same way that engineer was so willing to open himself up and provide that kind of time, there are so many professionals across the country, across so many different industries, who are absolutely willing to share their experiences with our young people. We built these career academies when I was in DC Public Schools, where instead of having the career and technical education people decide what was going to be taught, we created industry councils so that the engineers said, look, these are the hot new engineering, these are high wage, high growth engineering fields. So you need aviational engineering, you need environmental engineering, you need whatever. And we will pull together the right experts who can help teach this alongside your teachers, right? It takes industry and educators to do this together. And for a long time, we hadn't even asked industry to come and partner with us to do this. And so I think we have to be open and very different. This is what I mean when I say we haven't done things differently than we've been doing them 100 for the last 100 years. And that's why we weren't able to pivot. And that's why we're still not pivoting. I mean, when I look at what's happening again, we're not reimagining what education can look like. We're going right back to the same thing that we did in 2020, which is the same thing that we were doing before. And again, this is why I'm counting on parents are going to do something different because their kids only get this 3 years one time, right? And so parents are going to figure it out, and I want to empower parents to be the drivers of their kids' education.
Well, one thing that's going to empower parents is taking a visit to Reconstruction and find out what Kaya and the team are making available to us. Kaya, tell us, where can we go to find out more?
You can go to www.reconstruction.us. That's our website. All of our classes are on. You can sign up for classes. You can pre-register for classes that are coming soon. We have classes during the school year. We have a ton of new classes coming out for the summer, and we'd love to have you as part of the Reconstruction community. You should follow us on Instagram at reconstruct_US. You can follow us on Twitter, same thing. We've got a Facebook group called Reconstruction, a Facebook page. We're on all the socials, and so follow us, check us out, buy a gift card for kids that you know who you think should take a Reconstruction course. Sign your family up for our spades course or our film course or our cooking course or our stepping course. Give it a shot and come have a lot of fun with us while you're learning about African American history and culture.
I think I'm going to check out that cooking class. I like to cook. I think that might be a lot of fun.
It is a ton of fun. It's a ton of fun.
I've said this to other teachers. I'm going to say it to you. I've been doing educational magic shows in schools for over 30 years. If I were to give you my magic wand, which right now is a big pen, and I said you can wave this wand and change education any way, how would you use that magic wand?
I have like 25 different things. I have 25 different things that I would do, but I think one of the things that I'm most obsessed with right now is high school. I think American high school is broken beyond repair, and I think we need to incubate totally new models of high school. And so I would wave my magic wand to create a number of high school experiments that get us to a different way for kids to learn when they're in their sort of adolescence, and reimagine the high school process. Maybe it's like the European system where there's 2 hardcore years of academics and then you choose a track to sort of major in. Maybe it is, I don't know, I would like to, maybe it's this industry-based stuff. Maybe it's all kinds of options and kids get to choose what they want. But my magic wand would be around reinventing the American high school.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to invite you back on to talk about those 24 other things at some point in the future. In the meantime, we want to invite everybody. We want to urge everybody to check out Reconstruction, whether you're African American, Irish. Excuse me, I was just telling a guest this. When I was growing up, I loved listening to talk radio, especially overnight where the weird shows are on when they talk to aliens and all that stuff. And here in Boston, there was a legendary overnight host called Larry Glick. And I would listen to my little transistor radio that I actually built myself. And people would call up and they go, Larry, I'm Irish American. Larry, I'm Italian American. I'm African American. He would always stop them and say, no. You are an American of Irish descent. You're an American of African descent. And I would love it if we could get to that point where we were all thinking of each other as Americans with these different backgrounds. And they're really cool backgrounds, so I want to learn about yours, and you're going to want to learn about mine.
I want to learn about yours, exactly.
Yeah. We've had a great time speaking with the driving force behind Reconstruction, Kaya Henderson. Kaya, thank you so very much. This has been a blast.
Thank you, Jed. I had a ball.
Please be sure to join us for the next episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Heather Barr. She'll be here to celebrate Saving Berry. Hey, I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful. Of course, I want to start by thanking our guest, Kaya Henderson. Please be sure to check out Reconstruction. I want to thank our sponsor, The Secret Science of Sports, the math, physics, and mechanical engineering behind every Grand Slam, triple axel, and penalty kick. Written by our Dean of all things STEM and STEAM, Jennifer Swanson. My team deserves a big thank you. Yes, indeed. Thank you to Alejandro Doherty, Fatima Khan, Rory Grady, Skylar Strauss. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all believe that you deserve a big thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.